Okay, this is Mr. Burgess. We're going to do a little bit of reviewing today, just a really short reviews to get us ready for the Alex review we're about to take. So we've been talking about the Pythagorean theorem that basically states that for every right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we were told that the c is along the side of the triangle. It's on the opposite side of this right angle. Sometimes they label it with another variable, but that's C. And then the two sides next to the right angle are called A and B, the legs. So in this particular case, the first type of problem that we did was we wanted to find C, or the hypotenuse. So basically, we just put the numbers that they gave us for the two legs. So 10 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. Then we squared the two legs. That gave us 100 plus 64. Then we added them together and we got 164. And all of that continues to equal C squared. Then we showed you how if we unsquare a square or take the square root of a squared number, we just end up with that original number. So if we take the square root of 164, we will get our answer. And so I'll do that with my calculator. So 164 square root. And so this ends up being 12.80624. It's a really big number, a really big decimal. So we usually have you round to the nearest tenth or the nearest hundredth. So if we round to the nearest hundredth, this would be 12.0, or excuse me, let's go back to the calculator, 12.81. That would be to the nearest hundredth. To the nearest tenth, it would just be 12.8. So depending on what we ask you, that's what we'll be looking for the answer. Okay, then we moved on to triangles where you knew the hypotenuse and one of the legs. So in this case, we had to do 4 squared equals 11 squared. And I forgot to put b squared plus a squared equals 11 squared. I kind of got those backwards. But anyhow, we've got b squared plus 16 equals 121. Now to find the side b, we just do b squared equals the square root of 121 minus 16. So using our calculator once again, 121 subtract 16 equals 105. And we do the square root, we get 10.25. So B equals 10.25. And that's going to be in meters. All right, so there's our first couple we saw. Then we moved on to what we called the converse of the Pythagorean theorem, which basically said that if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, if that really happened, then this would be considered a right triangle. But what we didn't make clear was this. If a squared plus b squared is greater than c squared, then you have an acute triangle. Or if a squared plus b squared is less than c squared, you have an obtuse triangle. And I think there's one problem on the review today where you may be asked to determine if it's acute or obtuse. And if you can't do it this way, you can just look at the triangle and determine that if it's acute or obtuse. Then we did a couple of word problems. That was the last type of problem we did. So Ryan is building a slide for his kids. The ladder is 6 feet tall. So I'm going to kind of draw a picture of it over here. So here's the ladder. And he wants the bottom of the slide to be 8 feet from the ladder. So the bottom of the slide to come out at about 8 feet. So basically we're looking at C right here to find out how long the slide has to be. So C squared equals 6 squared plus 8 squared. And so if you do that, you'd have 36 plus 64 which if you added them together would be 100. So c squared equals 100. Take the square root of both sides, and the slide would have to be 10 feet long in order for this to fit what he wants. And then we went on to show you a number of others. For example, what's the diagonal of an envelope? We also mentioned a couple of these. These are kind of trick questions. We said, how big is this big square right up here? And all you had to do was add together 18 plus 36. And in that case, you'd get 54 centimeters squared. And that's just a kind of a definition of the Pythagorean theorem with a picture. All right, well, good luck on today's review, and we'll talk to you later. About how to find the distance between these 2 points on a graph. So what we showed you was that you needed to complete the triangle by finding the distance from this point to the straight up and down point of the next point over. And then the point of the line that goes up and down to create this right triangle. And if you notice, you can also use the ordered pairs to find those distances by looking at the difference between the x values and the difference between the y values. So then you set up your Pythagorean theorem equation with 6 squared plus 7 squared equals c squared. Multiply those out and add them together. And then to find c, you have to take the square root. So you end up with c equals the square root of 85. And if the question asks for a non-decimal estimation or an exact answer, this is what it wants. But if it wants just a decimal rounded to the nearest tenth or something like that, then you go ahead and take the square root of it, like this. So that should summarize what we've done so far. So thank you very much.